Yeah, they do that. Okay.
Hey guys, we are live. Once more, we are live. Today we have a lot to talk about, but mostly centering on one big story, and that's a story that broke at the latter part of last week and into this weekend, and that's Cambridge Analytica.
It's really a bombshell of a story. Attributed to Carol Cadwalader of The Guardian. And she got some really good insight from Christopher Wiley, a man who worked for Cambridge Analytica, and we'll be covering that today. And I'll let Brian take this while I do a few things here.
Yeah. So basically, the big story that we're covering today is the whistleblower Christopher Wiley. He worked for Cambridge Analytica in 2014, I believe. He left them, but he basically came forward and started to leak information and tell the world what Cambridge Analytica was actually doing. And it's quite frightening. Basically, Wiley says that Cambridge, not only did they collude with Trump, Russia, and all that whole sphere of things, but they were targeting Facebook users against their will and using that data that they harvested from Facebook users. Wiley says 50 million plus, to target voters, to target people, for whether it was for companies that were hiring them or the Trump campaign or the Russians, perhaps. They were targeting these individuals based on their Facebook profiles, the data that they gathered from their Facebook profiles.
So let me kind of tell you what Cambridge Analytica does. I'll just give you a review of what they actually do. They're basically a data research company, and Christopher Wiley is a brilliant young man. He's only 28 years old, and he was actually working for them when he was, I believe it was when he was 24 he started. And they basically take data that they can gather from different resources, but in this case, 50 million Facebook profiles were exported for their use. So they took information from Facebook, built up these psychological profiles of you, me, your friends, whoever else, in America and the UK mostly, and they took this psychological data and they tried to figure out what kind of information to each grouping of people with different psychological profiles would react to certain news, certain fake news or bogus news. I don't like using the term fake news, but false news. So they basically took this data and they said, okay, this group of people here, they're going to be prone to believe stories about Hillary having a child sex ring in the basement of a pizza parlor. These people are going to believe that Hillary did this. So they basically figured out who's going to be affected by certain stories and what stories would make these individuals in different groups, change their vote and vote for another candidate. And in Trump's case, it was to help direct voters to vote for him. So they basically stole data and they used it. It's not 100% proven that yet, at least by the media, that the Facebook data was actually used by Trump, but it's pretty much a given. Like, there's no direct ties in the public's eye about that, but Cambridge Analytica was taking data from people, and they stole data from Facebook, according to the allegations, and used this data without people's permission to build profiles about them and then target them with certain news stories that would alter their vote in the elections, and not just for President Trump, but also in the Brexit vote and other votes. They affected the Nigerian elections. They affected a lot of third world countries' elections.
Yeah, and what's key here is that this whole Cambridge Analytica spawned from a military contractor, I believe, in England called SCL.
Yes.
And SCL, they were basically creating a software that could profile, which was basically a profiling algorithm, which could take this information they obtained, the data they obtained from Facebook, and find mental vulnerabilities in people. And then they use those mental vulnerabilities, this was like a military weapon of sorts, to influence those people. So they took the mental vulnerabilities and they figured out what, like Ed said, what they'd be influenced by the most, and then they'd send that out to them. So it was like, this was actually a military grade software that Cambridge was using. And this Dr. Kogan created an app, like a typical Facebook app or smartphone app, and when users used it, they had to select that they were willing to share information, like most apps, but instead of just sharing their information, it shared each of their friends on Facebook's information. So if you have 600 friends on Facebook, all of their information is being shared with this app
illegally. Like it's
against Facebook's terms of service. At least we don't know the technical legalities of it. But
well, in the UK, it's illegal to share information without people's permission, and it's also illegal to sell information, which is another part of the story. The information was sold.
Yeah. So this Dr. Kogan, who wrote this app and who was basically created that could harvest this information, he also happened to be a professor at Cambridge University, I believe.
Yeah.
And also a visiting professor in Russia. Now, Russia was giving him grants, funding his research into this.
Yeah, so the professor was getting paid by the Russian government to do this type of research. And also, there's a huge Russian connection that comes in because there's a Russian connection here because what was it? Can you elaborate more on the Russian connection?
Well, there's Luke Oil.
Luke Oil. I'm sorry. Luke Oil is a Russian oil company run by CEO Veget Alekperov, and he is an associate of Vladimir Putin. And Cambridge Analytica was trying to. They sent documents to Luke Oil and basically showing that they can do what Luke Oil wants them to do, but what
Christopher Wiley came forward.
Yeah, Christopher Wiley came forward and showed that these emails that were being sent to Luke Oil weren't about helping Luke Oil gain customers or sell more oil. It was about elections.
Yeah,
and how to change election results.
Why does this Russian oil company want to change election results unless they have more in it than what seems? Was Russia pushing them to this? I guess there's reasons why a Russian oil company would want to influence elections because of sanctions. But these Russian oil companies, who's really behind these Russian oil companies? Vladimir Putin.
Yes, and the CEO of Luke Oil is a very close associate with Vladimir Putin. So that link right there sounds very fishy. And what else is interesting is that Wiley says that Cambridge Analytica actually contacted WikiLeaks when it was known that WikiLeaks had Hillary Clinton's emails, and they contacted WikiLeaks and actually said that they can help them distribute these emails. So basically what that tells me is that they wanted to use their psychological profiling to distribute these certain emails to certain individuals based on their psychological profiling.
Yeah, and then Steve Bannon comes into all this. Steve Bannon was actually on the board of directors for Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah.
And he also happened to be one of the higher-ups in the Trump campaign. Steve Bannon, but basically what Christopher Wiley, the whistleblower from Cambridge Analytica, said was that Steve Bannon was interested in Cambridge because he wanted to use their technology as a weapon in his culture wars. So he wanted to use this technology to influence culture and to spark this culture war that so many people have talked about that Bannon was all for.
Yeah. And here's another interesting point. Channel 4 News in the UK have an expose that they created. It's a video showing undercover individuals going into Cambridge Analytica and discussing with them how Cambridge Analytica can help them. And supposedly it divulges a lot of information, and it may prove some of these links in a more solid form. And Cambridge Analytica and Facebook both threaten Channel 4 News and The Guardian if this expose airs, that they will sue them. But Channel 4 News is actually going to air it today at 7:00 p.m.
Their local time.
So
what is that, like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock p.m.
Either 1
Eastern
or 2.
time? something you note is that UK laws are different than US laws. In the United States, Channel 4 would have no problem airing this, but the UK laws are a little bit different, so there was some talk about them actually maybe pulling this expose.
But they're actually moving forward. And today, the Guardian article came out, which is basically an interview and a profile of Christopher Wiley, the man who is telling all this information. And it's interesting, Christopher Wiley's a Democrat. He's a homosexual 28-year-old man, but he was actually working for Bannon.
Is he a UK citizen or an American citizen?
I'm not exactly sure.
I don't know if you could say Democrat then.
Well, he's a liberal. He's a liberal Democrat. That's what he is. And he's basically coming out and saying, I can't believe that I played such a large role in this illegal activity, in this activity that basically helped throw elections, the Brexit vote, and the Trump election.
Now that's another that Brexit and Trump link is actually a lot stronger than some of you might realize. I believe, at least.
Yes.
And these same people that were helping Trump, these Russians that met at Trump Tower, as soon as that Trump Tower meeting ended, they flew to London just in time for the Brexit vote.
Natalia Veselnitskaya, Rob Goldstein, and an unknown woman, Yana Gorakova, who I'm still not sure who she is, but she was actually dining with Goldstone and dining with the Avalarovs on the day before the original Trump Tower meeting, and she left New York with Goldstone to fly to the UK just in time for the Brexit vote. And I've reached out to Yana to see what role she played in this, but she hasn't gotten back to me. I'm hoping she still will. But I think she's an important link that the rest of the media should be looking into as well. And I haven't heard her name mentioned at all.
Yeah, I think that this Cambridge Analytica story is gonna really kind of blow up over the next week or so. I think that it's gonna start getting the attention it deserves because it's so much bigger than most people really realize.
Yeah, I mean, even if say for example, Trump is saying there is no Russian collusion, and say there's that 1% chance that there is no Russian collusion, the whole Cambridge Analytica thing might even be worse. I mean,
even if the Russians aren't tied to Cambridge, which it appears they are, the fact that it appears as if they use this harvested data from Facebook to influence the vote.
Yeah, well, basically, if say Cambridge Analytica came to Trump, this is what it appears to me. This is what appears to have happened. Came to the Trump campaign through Bannon because Bannon worked for Cambridge Analytica. Bannon then became a member of the campaign team and then later a member of the White House. They came to Bannon and Trump, basically, and they said, listen, we can help you win this election. We have data. We have Facebook data. And actually, Christopher Wiley said that Cambridge Analytica met with Corey Lewandowski in 2015, telling him that they have this Facebook data. And so they knew about that Facebook data, yet they still worked with Cambridge Analytica to basically take stolen data from you, me, and all your friends and target you with fake news stories that they knew would psychologically potentially alter your vote. And Trump won the election. So to me, that is just as bad, as, if not as worse, as possible Russian collusion.
Well, and it can't be minimized how important Bannon's role was in Cambridge. He wasn't just an employee; he was a director. A director is basically any corporation or any business has a series of directors, maybe 5 individuals, and they actually manage the direction of the company. So basically, these people combined, how many ever directors they had, basically make up the management of the company. Higher up than the CEO.
Well, here's the thing. Do you think that Mueller is going to... Mueller already interviewed Steve Bannon. Do you think that interview is kind of a setup to catch him lying about Cambridge Analytica? Do you think...
I think it's clear that Mueller knows Cambridge's role was much larger than most people have believed.
Well, I mean, we haven't seen any arrests or indictments in regard to Cambridge Analytica.
What I think is interesting is that Cambridge is... Like, you haven't heard about any interviews with Cambridge. You haven't really heard the CEO, Nix. Like, you haven't heard him being called in front of Congress or anything. So that's interesting. Like, you have to imagine that Mueller was well aware of this tie-in with Cambridge. I'm sure it wasn't just this whistleblower who came forward and now he knows.
No.
I think that he's probably been investigating this for some time.
I think Wiley might have some interesting information from Mueller, though, and I don't believe he's been interviewed yet. But at the same time, it's like I'm wondering if Mueller actually used the Steve Bannon interview that we heard was like 12 hours long a few weeks ago to ask him questions about Cambridge Analytica, get him when Mueller already knows these details in order to get Steve Bannon in line to federal authorities, and then he can go back to Bannon and threaten him with an indictment, or maybe even indict him, or get him to plead guilty to something, or just cooperate with him.
And what really gets under my skin is that the Trump supporters are still saying, oh, well, there are multiple guilty pleas, Papadopoulos, Flynn, but at Rick Gates, but who cares? It's not unrelated to Trump, Russia. You don't lie about these minute details unless there's a bigger story that you're trying to hide. So, yeah, maybe not directly related to Russia, but there's a reason they're lying about this, and it's to cover that up, clearly.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's huge that this may have also, it looks like it has also affected the Brexit vote in the UK, which I saw today they just extended the cooperation between the UK and the EU until 2020, which is a good thing because all this information that's coming out, they might actually need to have another vote.
Yeah, and Putin can't be too happy about that. He won another election yesterday. Clearly, that was from the reports on the ground. Their election was rigged. People claim that they were threatened if they did not vote for Putin. There were reports of ballot stuffing, where you basically stuff multiple ballots in as you're putting your own ballot in.
Well, and at the same time, he was jailing his opponents.
Yeah, it's Lavrov,
and that brings up some interesting points about Trump calling for the prosecution.
Navalny. I'm sorry, I said Lavrov. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's been calling for the prosecution of his opponents. So it's like
you're only a couple steps away from an authoritarian government.
Yeah, I mean, if we allow Trump to get away with what he's been doing and what he probably plans on doing. I'll take a few comments from Twitter. Hashtag Krasenstein Live. You can send us your comments and questions. So Stephen Joseph, this is kind of off, or I'll take one about the Cambridge story real fast. Actually, there are none about the Cambridge bombing. Cambridge story. Stephen Joseph says, so what if Stormy talks? Can't get blood from a turnip. Well, Stormy, that's coming Sunday. On Sunday, the 60-minute interview is going to be airing with Stormy Daniels. And it's interesting to me, the day before that will be the March for Our Lives all across the country that's put together by the Parkland school shooting survivors.
So these are two incidents that Trump does not want America to take part in or view. It wouldn't be surprising if a major move is made this coming weekend, whether it's firing Rosenstein, firing Sessions. I don't know, but if something's going to happen soon, I think this weekend's going to be when it's going to happen.
Well, it's also interesting to note that the Senate is on recess starting on the 24th. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to happen either this week or this coming weekend.
Yeah, be prepared for something big to happen over the next week. That's my warning here.
Yeah, definitely. I think if something's going to happen in the near term, it's going to be this week or this weekend. Most likely this week. Probably Friday.
There's a couple other little things we wanted to talk about. This is going to be a shorter episode, I assume. But the Austin bombings. Some of you guys probably saw it. It's a hashtag on Twitter. There's been 4 bombings now in Austin, Texas. They've been mail bombs. They've been package bombs. And they have targeted African Americans and minorities thus far. The media hasn't been covering it, which is surprising, I guess, or maybe not surprising.
I posted the wrong thing here. I'm sorry. I posted the wrong.
Yeah, I did redid it. So that these Austin bombings are quite dramatic in that the immigrant and the African American communities in Austin are seemingly threatened. They don't know if they're going to be next. The president has not mentioned this. Perhaps that's because they're African American and immigrants rather than white Christians. But it's certainly something that we got to watch closely, because if these continue, it's going to really send dread and terror down the spine of Austin.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't know. You want to call it a show now?
Yeah, but we just wanted to cut in.
I'm sorry. On my Twitter, I posted the link to last week's video. So
some of you guys
might have been watching
it.
the wrong video, but I apologize for that. But we'll do another show later this week, I'm sure.
Yeah, and if anything big happens, which we both kind of predict something's gonna happen. Trump's tweet this morning was what was it? He said a total witch hunt with massive conflicts of interest. That's how he left off his tweet.
Yeah, Trump is very upset, and he's gonna.
He's clearly looking at a path how to end the Mueller investigation, and I think he'll probably act on this urge that he seems to have.
Yeah,
and I think it's gonna be soon. So we'll come live if anything major breaking happens like that. We'll also just follow us on Twitter, and we'll continue to post any news we see. Sorry, this episode was a little discombobulated. We had some technical issues, but we just want to get out the news about Cambridge Analytica.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so we're gonna end it here. Thanks so much for joining us, and stay tuned.